It began with silence. A strange, hollow silence outside Buckingham Palace that morning. The kind that comes only before something truly devastating breaks. The gates were closed, the flags hung heavy, and the crowd that usually hummed with polite chatter stood frozen, faces turned toward a single microphone on the steps. Everyone could feel it. Something had gone terribly, terribly wrong. And then Prince Harry appeared. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Not as the grinning rebel royal the world had grown used to, but as a broken man. His eyes, red and sleepless, darted toward the cameras. His voice shook as he said the words that would send shockwaves across continents. I need to speak the truth about my wife. No one could breathe. For a moment, even the flashbulbs stopped. The prince who once renounced the royal life to protect Meghan Markle was now standing before the world to expose her. He looked down, took a deep breath, and continued, his every word trembling with disbelief. For months, he said slowly, classified communications from inside the royal family were being leaked, sold, to foreign outlets. I didn't want to believe it until I saw the proof. And that proof pointed straight to my wife. The words hit like thunder. You could see the shock ripple through the press corps, one reporter covering her mouth, another muttering, impossible. But deep down, the world had been waiting for something like this. A reckoning. The fairy tale that once began with a royal wedding carriage had finally turned into a political scandal. And as Harry spoke, the crowd outside the palace turned from awe to fury. People began shouting questions, desperate for more. What documents? Who else knew? Was Meghan working alone? But Harry didn't answer. He simply stepped back, eyes glassy, whispering something no microphone caught. A name, perhaps, or a plea, before walking away under the heavy London rain. Within minutes, that clip went global. Every news network replayed it. CNN, BBC, Sky News. All cutting between Harry's trembling face and footage of Meghan Markle's California mansion being swarmed by unmarked vehicles. Helicopters hovered. Police cars formed a barricade. Within the hour, the headline that would dominate history appeared on every screen. Meghan Markle under arrest. National security investigation launched. It didn't feel real. For years, the world had watched Meghan and Harry's journey, from starry-eyed love to royal rebellion. But nothing prepared anyone for this. How did it all unravel so completely? And what could she possibly have leaked that triggered a national security probe? Let's rewind. Because to understand the chaos that unfolded in that single minute, we need to go back to the beginning of the cracks in the crown. When Meghan and Harry first left the monarchy in what the media called Megxit, their story was painted as romantic rebellion, two lovers breaking free from royal chains to build a modern life. They were young, glamorous, global. They promised to keep their dignity, to remain in service, just in a different way. But behind the carefully curated interviews and polished Netflix specials, a darker storm was brewing. The palace had noticed something strange. Certain details, internal schedules, private memos, even draft statements that were never meant to see daylight, began appearing in obscure international columns and gossip pages, often within days of being written. At first, officials blamed internal leaks. But then came something far more serious. An entire classified briefing concerning royal security procedures during international visits appeared word for word in a foreign publication. That couldn't have been an accident. And yet, when they traced the origins, the fingerprints led not to London, but to California. You can imagine the panic inside the palace. Meetings were held in secret. Phones were confiscated. And all the while, Harry was thousands of miles away, living in Montecito, utterly unaware that a storm was closing in on his own home. Until one night, an encrypted email surfaced. The contents have never been made fully public, but insiders described it as highly sensitive. It included financial records, security schedules, and diplomatic correspondence between the palace and foreign governments. All of it ended up in the hands of a private media syndicate operating out of Europe. And the sender? A personal email address connected to Meghan Markle's inner circle. That was when the quiet suspicion turned into a full-blown intelligence probe. The British government couldn't ignore it anymore. According to palace insiders, MI5 was discreetly looped in, not to embarrass the royal family, but to prevent something much larger, a potential breach of national security. And yet, even then, no one wanted to believe Meghan could be involved. Prince Harry especially. Those close to him say he was defensive, angry even, whenever her name came up. They're targeting her because she's American, he allegedly said. They'll never stop punishing us for leaving. He stood by her, publicly and privately, until the day evidence landed right in front of him. That's the moment everything changed. According to sources familiar with the investigation, Harry received a call from a senior royal aide. The aide reportedly told him that a series of confidential documents had been traced to his household, and that his wife's device might be involved. Harry allegedly dismissed it at first, but curiosity got the better of him. That night, he opened Meghan's laptop. What he found, they say, left him frozen. There, in her sent folder, were encrypted exchanges with several foreign media contacts, some using pseudonyms, others through private servers. The tone of the emails wasn't casual gossip. It was business, calculated. There were payment confirmations, requests for specific royal data, and chillingly professional phrases like, "The next drop will follow once funds are confirmed." Harry's hands reportedly shook. He confronted her. She denied it, at first calmly, then angrily, insisting it was all manipulation, that the media was framing her. But when he showed her one particular message, an email that contained a classified memo about the king's private travel schedule, she went silent. And in that silence, Harry said later, "I felt the air leave the room." That's the moment the prince stopped being a husband defending his wife and became a man staring at the ruins of his own trust. Days later, the palace went into lockdown mode. Officials were briefed that Meghan Markle might face questioning under the Official Secrets Act. Even foreign governments were notified discreetly. But the press didn't know, not yet. For months, the investigation continued in complete secrecy, with teams quietly gathering digital evidence, tracing offshore payments, and mapping communications between Meghan's California residence and European media entities. Then came the breaking point. Last week, an internal report surfaced linking the leaks to potential political interference. It wasn't just gossip anymore, it was treason adjacent. The Crown's legal advisors urged immediate action, and the Home Office gave the green light for a formal investigation. At dawn, UK authorities issued a warrant for Meghan Markle's questioning. Within hours, the US authorities were contacted to assist. It was one of the fastest bilateral cooperation efforts ever undertaken involving a royal. And when the convoy pulled up to her Montecito mansion, neighbors watched in stunned silence as armed agents escorted her away, calm, composed, yet visibly shaken. But here's where it gets darker. While the arrest footage looped on every network, insiders claimed something else had happened behind the scenes, something no camera captured. In the moments before her arrest, Meghan reportedly made a phone call to someone overseas, whispering, "It's over." They know. Who was she calling? What was it that was over? No one knows for sure. But that single phrase became the centerpiece of a new theory, that Meghan wasn't working alone, that there was an entire network behind the leaks, and that her arrest was just the first domino to fall. Prince Harry, meanwhile, was forced into the unimaginable. The man who once gave up his royal duties to protect Meghan was now cooperating with investigators to expose her. He appeared pale, defeated, almost ghost-like. Friends say he hadn't eaten in days, and when asked by a confidant if he regretted speaking out, he reportedly said, "I didn't have a choice. The truth was burning a hole through my life." And yet, even as he told the world his truth, he refused to sound triumphant. His statement wasn't angry. It was weary, filled with heartbreak. "This is not revenge," he said quietly. "It's accountability." Those words echoed across the palace halls, through the press, and around the world. Because deep down, everyone knew. This wasn't just another royal scandal. This was something bigger. A story of love turned into liability. A warning about how power, secrecy, and ego can tear even the most powerful family apart. But here's the question that still hangs in the air. Why would Meghan Markle, a woman who seemingly had it all, risk everything? Was it greed? Was it revenge for years of royal rejection? Or was there something even more dangerous, something that had been pulling her strings all along? As the investigation deepens and UK authorities begin to unearth the money trail, one detail has already emerged, one that could change how history remembers her forever. And it all began with an email that was never meant to be opened. But what was in that email? Who sent it? And how deep does this betrayal go? The answers lie just ahead. Because what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. It happened at exactly 6:43 a.m. Pacific time. The quiet, manicured calm of Montecito was interrupted by the sudden roar of helicopter blades slicing through the dawn. Neighbors thought it was another paparazzi stunt, maybe a drone chasing a photo of Meghan Markle's morning jog. But this was no tabloid chase. This was a government operation. Within minutes, 2 black SUVs rolled down the curved drive leading to the Sussex estate. The engines idled low, doors opening in perfect sync. Out stepped men and women in plain suits. No guns drawn, no chaos. Just that eerie precision that only happens when the stakes are high and the suspect's important. Inside the house, Meghan was reportedly still in her robe, sipping coffee by the window when the knock came. A firm, deliberate 3-tap rhythm that echoed through the marble halls. She frowned, set her cup down, and walked to the door. Then came the voice, calm, official, practiced. "Mrs. Meghan Markle, this is the Metropolitan Police acting in cooperation with U.S. authorities. We have a warrant for your immediate questioning under the Official Secrets Act." For a few seconds, she didn't move. Her hand froze on the doorknob. Somewhere in the distance, her dog barked. And then, as if something inside her gave way, she quietly opened the door. The lead officer showed her the document. Her face paled, eyes flicking between the words and the insignia at the top. Official Secrets Act. Classified Communications. National Security. 3 phrases that no one ever expected to see next to the name Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex. Cameras began arriving within minutes. A helicopter from a local news station captured the scene. Meghan stepping out, head lowered, wrapped in a cream robe, flanked by 2 plainclothes officers. She didn't resist. She didn't cry. She just whispered something to the officer beside her, something no microphone caught. And then she disappeared into the back seat of the unmarked SUV. Within 20 minutes, every major media outlet in the world had broken the story. CNN went live with a red banner. Breaking: Meghan Markle Indiana custody over classified leaks. In London, it was already afternoon. The palace had been alerted moments before the news broke, but by the time courtiers gathered in the emergency communication room, the footage was everywhere. And in the middle of that chaos, King Charles sat in silence. No words, no anger, just that heavy stare, like a man who'd seen one too many betrayals unfold within his family walls. According to an aide present in the room, Charles simply whispered, "So it's true," before dismissing everyone except his security advisor. Meanwhile, the public went mad. Social media exploded in disbelief. Hashtags like #Meghan arrested and #royal leak trended within an hour. Some refused to believe it, calling it a setup, a smear campaign. Others demanded answers. What secrets had she leaked? To whom? And why? But for the investigators, there was no room for speculation. Evidence had already spoken. Back in Montecito, Harry had been alerted moments before the arrest. According to insiders, he received a call from a government liaison telling him to stay inside. When he asked why, the response was simple: "You'll know in 5 minutes." He looked out the window and saw the flashing lights. And that's when the truth he'd tried to outrun, came crashing down. Sources close to the couple say Harry was in a state of shock. He reportedly tried calling her as the vehicles pulled away, but her phone was already confiscated. For the first time in his life, the man who had once called himself the Protector was utterly powerless. Across the Atlantic, the Royal Press Office released a statement so brief it raised more questions than it answered. The palace is aware of the ongoing investigation concerning matters of national importance. His Majesty's government is cooperating fully with authorities in both countries. No mention of Meghan. No mention of Harry. No denial, no defense. Just silence, the kind that feels like an admission. But the question remained: what could possibly have been serious enough to warrant such a swift, international operation? Leaking royal gossip? Hardly. This was about classified communications. Documents tied not only to the royal household, but also to government operations, security briefings, and internal correspondence between the palace and Downing Street. The kind of information that, in the wrong hands, could compromise the safety of multiple officials. That's why it wasn't just the tabloids buzzing now. It was Parliament. In Westminster, MPs were already calling for an emergency review. One lawmaker told Sky News, "If what's being alleged is true, this could be one of the most serious breaches of royal protocol and national security in modern history." Meanwhile, intelligence sources leaked that the investigation had uncovered substantial evidence of digital transmissions from a Montecito-based device to unverified foreign servers. The implication was chilling. This wasn't just gossip sharing. This was espionage-level data transfer. As these revelations spread, Harry's world began collapsing in real time. Friends say he refused to leave his home for days. He switched off his phone, disconnected his Wi-Fi, and spoke to no one except his lawyer and a royal liaison officer. Inside sources claim he was broken, unable to reconcile the woman he loved with the criminal accusations plastered across the world's front pages. And then, in a twist no one expected, Harry issued a short statement through his spokesperson. Just one line: "I will cooperate fully with the authorities to ensure the truth comes to light." It was subtle, restrained, but powerful. And it told the world one crucial thing. Harry wasn't protecting her anymore. The ripple effect was instant. Meghan's defenders began to waver. Influential figures who once championed her publicly began quietly distancing themselves. Former friends deleted old posts. Hollywood PR teams scrambled to review associations. And yet, amid the chaos, something else was happening behind closed doors, something far more sinister. While the media focused on Meghan's arrest, investigators had started piecing together the money trail. Several foreign accounts showed large transfers, labeled under innocuous descriptions like consulting or brand advisory. But one particular payment stood out: a $3.7 million transfer from a Luxembourg-based holding company linked to a major international media conglomerate. The memo line simply read, "Content package, M.M." To the investigators, that was the smoking gun. But the real shock came when they traced the intermediary, the person who had allegedly arranged the deal. It wasn't a stranger. It was someone who had once worked closely with the palace's press office. Someone with access. Someone trusted. For days, British tabloids hinted at the possibility of an insider connection, but the identity was withheld under the Official Secrets Act. The palace's corridors buzzed with whispers, courtiers exchanging anxious looks, advisors quietly deleting old correspondence. Because if Meghan hadn't acted alone, it meant someone within those very walls had helped her. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Meghan was being questioned at a secure facility in Santa Barbara under the supervision of both British and U.S. intelligence liaisons. Reports described her demeanor as composed but distant. One insider revealed she spoke only when absolutely necessary and refused to confirm or deny any involvement in document transfers. Her legal team issued a statement insisting she was being unjustly targeted for political reasons. But behind that polished wording, tension was growing. Because the evidence was mounting faster than her defense could catch up. Inside interrogation, she was reportedly shown screenshots, copies of encrypted messages, bank transfers, and email chains linking her directly to confidential documents. Her reaction? A long silence, followed by a single sentence: "I didn't do this alone." Those words changed everything. Investigators paused. Cameras recorded. Suddenly, what looked like a closed case became something much larger. If she wasn't alone, who else was involved? And how high did it go? Meanwhile, the palace prepared for impact. Behind locked doors, King Charles met with his private secretary and advisors. "Containment," he said quietly, "must come before explanation." They understood what that meant. Protect the monarchy first, question later. Prince William, according to reports, was livid. Sources close to him said he slammed his phone down after watching footage of the arrest, muttering, "He brought her into this. Now look at us." But the one who suffered most was Harry. Insiders describe him as pale and withdrawn, spending hours staring at the TV replaying the footage over and over. When his closest friend called to check on him, he allegedly whispered, "It's like watching a life burn that you built with your own hands." And in a haunting twist, a letter arrived for him 2 days later, hand-delivered by an official courier. It was from Meghan, sent before her arrest, dated the night before. Inside, a single line: If they come for me, tell them they already know. No signature. No explanation. What did that mean? Did she know the investigation was closing in? Did she believe someone inside the palace had betrayed her first? That letter, sources claim, has since been turned over to investigators. But to this day, no one has publicly revealed its full contents. And that's where the story takes a darker turn. Because while the world focused on Meghan's public downfall, few noticed what was happening in the background. Files quietly sealed, phone records subpoenaed, and names whispered in government corridors. People who once stood shoulder to shoulder with her during charity galas and brand deals were suddenly unavailable for comment. The silence was deafening. Something bigger was at play, something that reached beyond Meghan Markle, beyond the monarchy, and into the undercurrents of political power itself. And it all started with that one morning arrest, a moment that didn't just shake the crown, but threatened to crack it entirely. But if the arrest shocked the world, what came next would send it spiraling. Because hidden within the evidence that led to Meghan's downfall was one email that didn't just incriminate her, it revealed how it all began. And once that email surfaced, the story of love, betrayal, and treachery inside the royal circle would explode in ways no one saw coming. Because the truth wasn't just about leaked secrets, it was about what she was promised in return. And when investigators finally uncovered that promise, everything changed. But that's coming next. Because what they found inside that first email would set off a chain reaction that the monarchy may never recover from. Every betrayal has a beginning. It rarely starts with malice. It starts with frustration. With a quiet resentment that festers day by day until it becomes something unrecognizable. For Meghan Markle, that resentment began not with the crown, but with silence, the kind of silence that follows every closed royal door. At first, it was small things. Her emails went unanswered. Her requests for press independence were denied. Royal aides whispered about her behind closed doors. She's too modern, one was overheard saying. Too opinionated. And Meghan, who had built her career on visibility, found herself trapped in the very system she thought she had escaped by marrying a prince. You could almost feel it, the disillusionment spreading like a crack in glass. In the early days after the wedding, she believed she could transform the monarchy's image. She had charm, charisma, and a following larger than most European royals combined. But behind palace walls, that popularity became a liability. The tabloids hounded her. Courtiers clipped her freedom. And when she looked for allies inside the institution, there were none. So when she and Harry left for California, it wasn't just a relocation, it was an escape. But what no one realized then was that Meghan hadn't left the monarchy behind entirely. She had brought it with her, in her laptop, her memories, and her anger. According to sources close to the investigation, the first leak occurred just months after Megxit. It wasn't a classified document or a major revelation. Just a minor palace memo about an upcoming royal trip. Somehow, that memo appeared almost word for word in a foreign entertainment column based in Spain. It seemed harmless at first, until more leaks followed. An email about a private meeting between Charles and environmental leaders in Scotland. A draft of an unreleased speech by Prince William. An itinerary marked confidential. Each one appeared on obscure websites before quickly being deleted, but not before being archived. It was like someone was testing the waters, seeing how far they could go before being noticed. When investigators traced the first digital footprints, they found something odd. The data originated from an encrypted IP address linked to a VPN server in California. But the VPN subscription itself was paid for by a Delaware-based corporation. That's when the threads began to intertwine. The Delaware company, it turned out, had ties to a media group in France. And that media group? It had recently signed a multi-year content deal with a production company co-owned by an unnamed Los Angeles resident. Those who followed the money found a loop, subtle, deliberate, and sophisticated. Payments flowed in circles, names disappeared behind shell companies, and the trail always ended in California. Still, without concrete proof of classified material, the palace couldn't act. And Meghan, meanwhile, was thriving, or so it appeared. She was pitching shows, signing with talent agencies, and making global appearances. But behind that glossy smile, insiders say she was restless. In private conversations, she often complained about the hypocrisy of the royal system, how it demanded silence while benefiting from leaks that favored its own image. "They leak about me all the time," she allegedly told a friend. "Why can't I tell my side?" That statement, "Why can't I tell my side?" would later become the foundation of her defense. But what she did next went far beyond self-expression. By mid-2022, the leaks became bolder. Full email threads between senior palace aides appeared in foreign outlets. Financial disclosures tied to royal charities surfaced online. Each time, they were slightly altered, just enough to obscure the source. Investigators believe this was intentional, a tactic known as staggered leaking, designed to confuse forensic tracking. But one particular message broke the pattern. It was an email dated September 8, 2022, the day Queen Elizabeth II passed away. At 6:41 p.m. UK time, just hours after the Queen's death was confirmed, a confidential draft statement, the palace's internal memorial message, was sent from a secure channel to the press embargo pool. Yet, within 22 minutes, a near-identical copy appeared in a non-British media outlet. Same phrasing, same timestamp. And the sender? A private Gmail account linked to a California-based IP. This was no coincidence anymore. This was precision. When investigators first flagged this leak, they still didn't have proof of Meghan's involvement. But then came the financial connection, a $250,000 consulting payment made to an account under one of her known business entities just 2 days later. The sender was a European media conglomerate that had published royal coverage using the leaked statement. Coincidence? Maybe once. But by now, there were too many of them. Let's pause for a moment and ask something no one dares to. Could this have been a form of revenge? Because if you trace the timeline, something dark begins to emerge. Every leak, every carefully timed drop, coincided with moments of royal friction. When the palace released statements about reduced security for the Sussexes, emails about palace budgets leaked. When tabloids questioned Harry's titles, private royal expense reports surfaced. When Meghan was accused of bullying aides, internal memos defending her appeared online, memos that were never meant to leave royal servers. It was as if someone, somewhere, was keeping score. According to one royal aide, she knew exactly what buttons to push. It wasn't random, it was strategic. But here's the irony. What began as an emotional reaction soon spiraled beyond control. Once a network of foreign contacts was established, it was no longer about one person's anger. It became business. Sources claim Meghan's communications were handled by intermediaries, digital brokers who specialized in content extraction. They would approach media outlets, hinting at exclusive insider royal access, and negotiate payments in cryptocurrency to avoid traceability. In exchange, they received classified materials, often disguised as research packages. Those brokers made millions. But so did she. Documents recovered during the investigation show that over a 16-month period, nearly $8 million flowed through offshore accounts linked to Markle's personal network. Some of the payments were labeled as production development, others as consulting fees. But forensic auditors found patterns. The deposits lined up perfectly with each major leak. By the time British intelligence realized the scale, it was too late. The information was already out, circulating across international servers, archived, mirrored, impossible to fully erase. The royal household went into quiet panic. Private calls were made to the Home Secretary. Emergency digital lockdowns were implemented. Even internal palace emails were switched to hard copy correspondence for a time. But the real question remained unanswered. How did Meghan get access to these documents in the first place? That's when the focus shifted to Harry. Though never accused of wrongdoing, investigators began examining whether his royal credentials, still valid on some restricted systems, had been used to access sensitive data. Experts now believe that's how Meghan initially gained access. Not through hacking, not through bribery, but through trust, through proximity. And that, in many ways, was the most painful part of all. For Harry, this wasn't just betrayal, it was violation. His security clearance, his identity, his heritage, all weaponized by the one person he thought he could protect. According to sources close to him, he confronted Meghan in late 2023 after receiving an encrypted message from a trusted contact inside the palace. The message included screenshots of documents that had been leaked to a Middle Eastern media outlet. One of those documents contained details of a royal family member's overseas security arrangements. Harry reportedly asked her directly, "Did you send this?" She didn't answer. He pressed again, and that's when she said, "You wouldn't understand. They made me do it." Those 5 words, "they made me do it," have haunted Harry ever since. Who were they? Was she referring to the media? To investors? To something deeper? Political pressure, perhaps? That's what investigators are now trying to uncover. Because in tracing Meghan's alleged communication network, intelligence analysts found encrypted exchanges between her device and multiple foreign domains, including one linked to a European political foundation known for funding media operations. It suggested something more calculated, a potential collaboration between wealthy foreign interests and a disillusioned ex-royal seeking power, money, or both. But here's the most unsettling twist. The deeper they dug, the more they found evidence that Meghan might not have been the original architect, that she was being guided, coached. A mysterious contact known only by the codename Solace appeared repeatedly in her email archives. Messages from Solace contained detailed instructions on what to send, when to send it, and how to disguise the transmissions. Investigators believe Solace was an intermediary, possibly tied to the media group paying for the leaks. Whoever they were, they knew exactly how to exploit her. And Meghan, perhaps blinded by bitterness, followed along. The operation grew bolder. By late 2023, she was allegedly preparing to release what one insider described as the Big One, a collection of internal royal communications that could have jeopardized not just reputations, but diplomatic relationships. That's when British intelligence moved in. Quietly, carefully. They didn't want to risk another scandal or a public confrontation. Instead, they began monitoring every call, every transmission, every payment. And then, they waited until the day she made a mistake. In December, one email she sent contained a digital signature traceable to her own personal IP address, an oversight that undid months of careful concealment. Within 24 hours, the system pinged in London. By the end of the week, warrants were being prepared. The trap had been set. And as the digital forensics team assembled the puzzle, a single document emerged that tied everything together. The very first email that had sparked the entire operation. It was labeled innocently, "Follow-up materials from M." But what it contained would shake the foundations of trust, loyalty, and national security inside the monarchy. Because that email didn't just reveal what was being leaked. It revealed why. And when investigators opened it, they discovered something so unexpected, so explosive, that it reframed everything they thought they knew about the case. Because hidden inside that first email was proof that Meghan hadn't acted on impulse. She had been planning this from the start. But what exactly did that email contain? Who was on the receiving end? And what secret was valuable enough to exchange for millions? Those answers are buried in the next chapter. And when you hear what was inside, you'll understand why the British government moved faster than ever before. Because that single email didn't just expose Meghan's actions. It exposed the beginning of an international operation, one that threatened to bring the entire royal institution to its knees. And the person who discovered it first? None other than Prince Harry himself. But what he did with that discovery changed everything. And no one, not even the king, saw it coming. It was small. At first, almost inconspicuous. A single message, buried in a morning inbox, time-stamped September 8, 2022. The day the world mourned Queen Elizabeth II. One email, one digital thread that would ignite a chain reaction capable of toppling decades of royal trust. The message arrived at 6:41 p.m. UK time. Its subject line seemed innocuous. Follow-up, statement draft. But anyone familiar with royal communications would have recognized the red flags immediately. It contained a draft of the palace's internal statement regarding the Queen's passing, a document that, under normal circumstances, would never leave the secure palace server. It was intended for internal eyes only, circulated among senior advisors to coordinate messaging across the Commonwealth. Yet within 22 minutes, an almost identical copy appeared on a non-British media site, hosted on servers in France. Same phrasing, same structure. Even a rare typo from the original draft was mirrored perfectly. The first thought for investigators was incredulity. Who could have done this? A cybersecurity analyst later recounted. There's no ordinary way for this draft to appear externally so quickly. This was either highly professional espionage or an inside job, and it didn't take long for their suspicions to converge on one person, Prince Harry, not because he was suspected of malfeasance, but because his credentials, still valid for limited access, could have been leveraged to reach internal documents. More importantly, the digital trail pointed toward a device registered to Meghan Markle's inner circle. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about leaked gossip or embarrassing emails. This was a classified communication intended to guide global sentiment during one of the monarchy's most delicate moments, the death of the sovereign. And suddenly, it was exposed on an international platform. When Harry received the news, sources say he froze. His hands reportedly trembled as he scrolled through screenshots, first of the French article, then of the original email headers, the metadata, and the timestamps. Everything pointed to the same source, Meghan's personal email network. It's hard to overstate what he must have felt in that moment. Shock, betrayal, a mix of disbelief and heartbreak. The woman he had given everything for, his name, his family, his life, was apparently implicated in a breach that carried not just personal consequences, but legal, political, and international ramifications. According to insiders, Harry immediately confronted Meghan. The conversation, which lasted hours, was described as tense, emotional, and devastating. Friends say Harry tried to reason with her, reminding her of the stakes, the security of his family, the reputation of the monarchy, the very real possibility of criminal charges. Her response, they say, was calm at first, then defensive. She allegedly said, "You don't understand. I had to do it. They wanted me to. I was protecting us." Protecting them? For whom? And from what? Investigators now believe this was part of a larger scheme. In the days following the email leak, forensic analysts traced digital pathways across multiple devices, VPNs, and even temporary server allocations. Their conclusion, the leak wasn't random. It was carefully planned and executed. Every step, every transfer, was deliberate. The timing suggested a strategic effort to coincide with key royal events. A draft of a statement about royal duties was leaked just hours before Parliament convened. A schedule of Prince William's upcoming engagements appeared on obscure European blogs shortly before official press releases. And yet, the one email that ignited the investigation was more than just a leak. It contained hints of a financial trail, an encrypted reference to an account in Luxembourg. Investigators discovered that payments from this account consistently aligned with the timing of subsequent leaks. Nearly $250,000 had moved in connection with the French media site that first published the Queen's draft statement. This single digital footprint, small, almost invisible, led to a massive realization: someone was monetizing royal secrets. But the plot thickened further. Harry, still in disbelief, began comparing the timing of leaks to the internal correspondence he had access to. The correlation was undeniable. Documents intended to remain internal were surfacing internationally. Precisely when Meghan Markle's business dealings or media appearances were generating the most attention. Was this coincidence? Or was it a calculated effort to profit from the monarchy's most vulnerable moments? The evidence left investigators with no choice but to escalate the matter. The Home Office and MI5 were alerted. Teams began compiling records, cross-referencing email headers, server logs, and financial statements. Every transfer, every sent email, every access point was cataloged and scrutinized. Sources say Harry was torn during this period. On one hand, he wanted to protect Meghan, as he had done so publicly for years. On the other, he now faced the reality that the woman he loved may have violated the very institution he had vowed to defend. And he wasn't alone. Palace aides, cybersecurity teams, and international intelligence operatives were all watching, waiting, and piecing together the implications of a single, extraordinary email. What made this email so incendiary wasn't just its content, but its context. A draft meant to unify a grieving nation, guide public sentiment, and coordinate messages across 54 Commonwealth nations had been compromised. That's when authorities realized the severity. This wasn't just an internal leak. This was a potential threat to national stability. The stakes became clear overnight. Within hours, legal teams were mobilized, royal security protocols were heightened, and a covert surveillance operation began to monitor communications from Meghan's devices. This email, innocuous in appearance to the untrained eye, had set off a chain reaction that would culminate in her arrest months later. But even as investigators traced the digital breadcrumbs, one question remained unanswered. Was Meghan acting alone, or was there someone orchestrating this behind the scenes? Cybersecurity experts analyzing the email patterns noticed irregularities. Certain message headers and encryption signatures suggested intermediary involvement. Someone else was guiding the timing, the content, and even the intended audience. The more the analysts dug, the more it appeared that the leaks weren't impulsive. They were methodical, coordinated, planned with precision that only a highly experienced operator could manage. Harry, according to sources, realized this during a private meeting with senior palace aides. He saw the evidence laid out, the email headers, the financial links, the timing. And for the first time, he understood the magnitude of the situation. This wasn't just a mistake or a lapse in judgment. It was something far more serious, something calculated. The realization was crushing. The prince who had once defended Meghan publicly now had to confront a truth that was almost too painful to acknowledge. The woman he loved, the woman he had sacrificed everything for, was at the center of a network that threatened not only the monarchy, but potentially national security. And yet, the full story remained hidden. Only those with access to the investigation knew the depth of the betrayal, and even they could only speculate about motivations. One detail, however, was indisputable. This single email had triggered the investigation that would ultimately lead to her arrest. Without it, authorities might never have pieced together the broader pattern of leaks, the financial transactions, and the connections to foreign media outlets. But here's the most unsettling part. As investigators tracked the email's path, they discovered something unexpected. It had been forwarded multiple times before appearing publicly. And in those forwarded messages, there were subtle references to future leaks. Instructions, guidance, cues. Someone had been orchestrating the dissemination from the very beginning. And that's what made the investigation so urgent. It wasn't just about one email anymore. It was about a network, a plan, a betrayal meticulously hidden in plain sight. By the time Harry realized the scope, authorities were already preparing arrest warrants. The pieces were in place. The timing was precise. The trap was ready. But what came next would shock the world even more. Because while the email started the investigation, the evidence it uncovered hinted at something bigger, something that no one, not even Harry, could have anticipated. It was one thing to leak a statement. It was another entirely to manipulate global media, coordinate payments, and draw in foreign operatives. And the most terrifying revelation? That someone close to the palace, someone trusted, may have been involved. The email didn't just expose a leak. It exposed the beginning of a conspiracy that would shake the monarchy to its core. And the first person to see it, the one who would bear the burden of that knowledge, was Prince Harry. What he did with that knowledge would set the stage for everything that followed. But no one, at that moment, knew just how far the fallout would reach. Because the investigation that began with a single email was about to explode into a scandal that no royal could have imagined. And when the story reached the public, everything changed forever. It was a quiet evening in Montecito, the kind of Pacific coast night that usually brings calm, waves lapping softly, palm fronds swaying, the air thick with the faint scent of salt and jasmine. But inside the Sussex residence, the air was tense, suffocating, as though the house itself sensed what was about to unfold. Prince Harry sat alone in the study, the faint glow of his laptop illuminating a face more haunted than anyone had ever seen. Friends say he hadn't slept properly in days. The news of the email leak had reached him hours earlier, and he was still trying to process what it meant. The palace had called him, quietly, discreetly, to ask for confirmation of certain digital paths. And now, sitting there in his own home, he realized he might be the only person who could fully see the scale of the disaster. He opened the email folder that had been flagged by British intelligence. At first glance, it looked innocuous, subject lines like statement draft, follow-up, nothing more than mundane correspondence. But when he clicked through the headers, something froze him in place. Metadata, timestamps, IP addresses, the recipient chain, everything pointed to one conclusion. Meghan. The woman he had trusted with his heart, with his family, with his entire life, she had been orchestrating leaks from within their own home. Every draft, every internal note, every confidential communication, it had been sent out to foreign media outlets in exchange for millions. And now, proof lay bare before him, indisputable. Harry's hands shook. His pulse pounded in his ears. He could feel the weight of betrayal pressing down on him like a physical force. It wasn't just anger. It wasn't just shock. It was the disorienting, stomach-churning horror of realizing that everything he believed about the person he loved most in the world might have been a lie. He called Meghan. No answer. He called again. Silence. His texts went unread. The realization began to settle in. She wasn't hiding from the authorities. She was hiding from him. Friends who spoke to Harry later said he was staggered, devastated, and numb all at once. The man who had faced bullets, media scrutiny, and global pressure could not face this. And yet, there was a glimmer of something else, clarity. He had to act. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but because the consequences of inaction were too severe to ignore. Because this wasn't just about him or even the royal family. This was about national security. And if the leaks continued unchecked, it could destabilize diplomatic relations, endanger lives, and irreparably damage the monarchy's reputation. The more he scrolled, the worse it became. There were screenshots of payment confirmations, offshore transfers, detailed instructions about what to leak and when. Some messages even contained timelines of upcoming royal events, suggesting a deliberate plan to align the leaks with moments of maximum exposure. Every new message he uncovered brought a fresh wave of disbelief. How long had this been going on? How much did she know about the consequences? And how many people, beyond the palace, had been involved in orchestrating this network? By late evening, Harry realized the full scope of what he was dealing with. This wasn't an impulsive act of anger or frustration. This was a sophisticated operation, financial, political, and media-oriented. And Meghan, whether willingly or under influence, was at the center of it. He remembered the first confrontation, the night he showed her the screenshot of the leaked document. According to insiders, the conversation had started calmly, with Harry asking her to explain. Her initial response was denial, but when he pressed, she said something chilling. You wouldn't understand. They made me do it. Who were they? Harry didn't know, and that uncertainty, that ambiguity, made the betrayal sting even more. He had been kept in the dark, manipulated not only by the leaks themselves, but by the person he had trusted to be his partner. By midnight, Harry's mind was racing. He was thinking about the implications for the monarchy, for himself, for his family. He knew he had to act carefully. One wrong move could make the situation worse. Not just for Meghan, not just for him, but for the institution they had once vowed to protect. He called his legal team. The message was urgent. Prepare for a potential national security inquiry, gather all correspondence, and be ready for investigators to contact him. Harry would cooperate fully, but he also needed protection, not from the authorities, but from the media storm that was already forming. Meanwhile, investigators were already moving. British intelligence had monitored the email trail and financial transactions for weeks, piecing together a puzzle that now pointed squarely to Meghan. But until Harry confirmed the findings, the investigation couldn't be fully solidified. He took a deep breath and sent a single message to Meghan. We need to talk. Now. No reply. And then came the next blow. Sources say that while Harry was processing the emails, the British Home Office reached out to inform him that a warrant had been prepared for Meghan's questioning under the Official Secrets Act. The investigation had escalated from internal scrutiny to a full-scale national security probe. He was staring at the screen, staring at the proof of her involvement, and realizing that his life, and the life of the woman he loved, would never be the same again. Then he saw the email that would haunt him the most. It wasn't the first one, nor the largest transfer, nor even the most detailed instructions. It was a short message from Meghan herself, addressed to one of the intermediaries. It read, "Ensure it reaches the right hands. Timing is everything. Trust me." The words were casual, almost innocent. But to Harry, they carried the weight of a calculated betrayal. Everything he had believed, that she loved him, that she wanted a life together, now collided with the evidence that she had knowingly endangered the monarchy for personal gain. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair, heart pounding, mind racing. How could it have come to this? The woman he had sacrificed so much for, the partner he had defended against the world, now stood accused of a crime that could cost her everything, and by extension, him. And then the thought that no one else could have borne. What if this wasn't the end? What if there were more emails, more leaks, more payments? How deep did it go? Hours later, Harry made his decision. He would cooperate fully with authorities. He would provide them with the access they needed, confirm the email chains, and ensure the investigation reached its conclusion. But in doing so, he knew it would destroy any chance of reconciliation. He would be forced to publicly distance himself, to bear the emotional weight of exposing the woman he loved. The night dragged on. Harry reviewed every email, every financial transfer, every server log. And as he pieced together the chronology, he realized the full truth. This was never just about leaks. This was about power, about influence, about money. And Meghan had been at the center, whether as a willing participant or as a manipulated pawn. By dawn, the world had already started catching whispers of the coming storm. The media in London, New York, and Los Angeles were all picking up faint hints of a royal scandal, unaware that the Prince of Wales' own son had just discovered the core of it. And for Harry, the most painful realization remained. He had discovered the truth too late to prevent the damage. Every document that had leaked, every payment that had been made, every secret that had reached foreign media outlets, it was already out there. The betrayal was complete. But the night's discovery wasn't the final blow. That would come when investigators traced the full network, the intermediaries, the foreign media executives, the offshore accounts, and realized that Meghan's actions were part of something far larger than anyone had imagined. Harry had uncovered the evidence. He had seen the emails. He had confronted her, and he had made the choice to act. But what came next would change everything, not just for Meghan, not just for him, but for the monarchy itself. Because what he discovered next wasn't just evidence of leaks. It was a roadmap of betrayal, carefully orchestrated, meticulously timed, and unimaginably dangerous. And it was about to bring the entire royal family into the eye of a storm that no one would escape. If you thought the email leaks were the end of the story, think again. Because in the shadows of the digital trails and financial transfers, investigators began noticing something chilling. A pattern that suggested Meghan Markle was not acting alone. It started with a seemingly minor anomaly. Certain emails, when analyzed in forensic detail, contained unusual metadata, headers that didn't match her devices, cryptic references, and timestamps that suggested coordination with external actors. Every forensic analyst who reviewed them agreed on one thing. Someone else was guiding these leaks. Someone with knowledge, access, and an agenda. Investigators gave this shadowy figure a code name, Solace. No one outside the investigation knew the real identity of Solace, not the palace, not the press, not even Harry. But the evidence of their involvement was undeniable. Emails containing instructions such as, timing is everything, ensure the documents reach the correct hands, and wait for confirmation before release, were traced back to encrypted servers located in Europe. The patterns indicated a highly organized operation, far beyond simple money-for-information deals. Who was Solace? Experts analyzing the communications suggested three possibilities: a foreign media executive, a political operative, or someone within the monarchy itself. Each option was terrifying in its own right. The first theory, a foreign media executive, seemed plausible. Multiple offshore accounts and large payments were connected to media conglomerates known to buy sensitive information about public figures. But even so, the precision of the leaks indicated someone with insider knowledge, someone who could anticipate what the palace would release, what statements would be made, and when. The second theory, a political operative, was even more disturbing. Certain emails contained references to international dealings, foreign policy implications, and diplomatic language. Investigators noted that the leaks were timed to coincide with moments of maximum political sensitivity. It wasn't just about tabloid exposure. It was about influence, leverage, and strategic chaos. And the third theory, someone within the palace, brought the chills. Think about it. The only way Meghan could have had such precise timing, such intimate knowledge, would be if someone on the inside was feeding her information. Someone she could trust or manipulate to gain access to the inner workings of the monarchy. According to insiders, This possibility forced the palace to act quickly. Access was immediately restricted. Communications were encrypted, servers were moved offline, and internal audits began in secret. Every aide, every staff member, even senior officials were scrutinized. And yet, the fact remained. Solace's guidance had been invisible, undetectable until now. Financial trails painted a clearer picture. Payments were traced to intermediaries with European connections, some using shell companies, others using cryptocurrency transactions that masked origins. One payment, for example, was routed from a Luxembourg holding company to a Swiss account, then split between two other accounts before reaching an entity tied to Meghan's business ventures. The chain was intricate, precise, and intentionally confusing, the mark of someone experienced in financial concealment. And this is where Harry's nightmare deepened. He wasn't just facing evidence of Meghan's involvement anymore. He was staring at the possibility that a larger network, Solace, had manipulated the leaks from the very beginning. Someone who had used Meghan as a pawn, who had orchestrated the timing, and who might still be working to influence outcomes behind the scenes. Friends say Harry spent nights pacing the estate, trying to make sense of it all. He was consumed, one source explained. It wasn't just betrayal. It was fear. Fear of what Solace could do, how deep this went, and who else might be involved. Forensic teams analyzed the email servers and discovered that Solace had established multiple VPN connections, masking the true location. Some traced back to major European capitals, others to private islands where corporate entities often registered domains for anonymity. It was a digital maze, designed to make tracking almost impossible. And yet, in that maze, a single pattern emerged. Solace always communicated instructions at critical junctures, before leaks, before payments, and before public statements. It was almost as if someone was orchestrating a chess game, using Meghan as a piece to control the board. At this point, investigators realized that the scope of the operation might extend beyond media leaks. Certain documents appeared to have diplomatic consequences, containing sensitive communications about foreign engagements, charity funds, and even security arrangements. Solace's influence, they realized, could have far-reaching implications. Harry learned this slowly, painfully, as he reviewed documents alongside palace security officials. Every new revelation felt like a punch to the gut. He knew Meghan's involvement, but the presence of Solace meant that even if she were detained, the full picture of the operation might never be revealed. Then came the shocking discovery. Solace wasn't just giving instructions. They were receiving information back, confirmations, updates, even additional data that hadn't yet been published. It was an active collaboration, a two-way exchange, indicating that the network was professional, organized, and dangerous. Harry's realization hit like a lightning bolt. Meghan wasn't merely leaking documents for money or influence. She was part of a carefully guided operation. The question that haunted him, and that haunted investigators alike, was terrifying. Who had been directing her, and why? Every possibility was worse than the last. A foreign power? A media empire? A rogue insider within the monarchy? Each carried consequences that could shake the foundations of not just the royal family, but British national security itself. The palace, meanwhile, moved swiftly. All communications were placed on emergency lockdown. Emails, internal memos, and digital records were relocated to secure servers. Senior aides were questioned, with some sent on temporary leave while investigations continued. Even courtiers closest to the Sussexes faced scrutiny. And yet, Solace remained elusive. Every lead led to another dead end. Every digital trace vanished into encrypted channels. Investigators realized they were dealing with someone who understood both the digital landscape and human psychology, someone capable of manipulating emotions, loyalties, and access. By the time Meghan was detained, Solace had already left little evidence directly tying themselves to the leaks. What remained was Meghan's involvement, the financial trails, and the digital footprints that painted a compelling, undeniable narrative, but only a fraction of the full operation. For Harry, this revelation was unbearable. He wasn't just grieving betrayal. He was grappling with the fact that someone had manipulated the person he loved into compromising everything he held dear. Friends say he confided to one aide, "I trusted her with everything. And now, I don't even know who she is anymore." It wasn't just about trust. It was about strategy, control, and power. Salas had shown the capacity to shape public perception, influence media coverage, and coordinate financial incentives, all while staying invisible. And that meant the danger was far from over. Investigators also discovered that Salas's instructions were often cryptic, using euphemisms and coded language. Terms like content package, follow-up, and timing confirmation appeared repeatedly. To anyone outside the network, they seemed mundane. To investigators, they were deliberate signals, instructions to execute the leaks with precision. This discovery reframed the entire investigation. Meghan's actions were no longer seen as isolated incidents of recklessness or greed. They were part of a larger, more insidious operation, one that could involve foreign entities, financial manipulators, and possibly rogue insiders within the monarchy.